A player with a I can fix him fantasy to a DM with licentious predatory behavior. Our stories today are definitely full of lustful intentions. I'm Saya from Tabletop Mayhem, and today we have 2 stories from the Reddit's RPG Horror Stories to explore, so let's dive in. Just a quick disclaimer, I'm getting over a really bad cold. You could probably hear it a little bit in my voice, but I've got a hot cup of tea and I'm going to persevere for you because this Reddit story is pretty juicy. Let's get into our first juicy story of the day. My players wanted to romance Strahd and got mad when I didn't let them. One of the rules of my tables, romance is okay until it's a weird, unhealthy dynamic. It makes me uncomfortable to play, so I don't want to include it in my games. Absolutely valid. So when one of my players, let's call them Sue, said they wanted to romance Strahd, I explained that it doesn't sit well with me. Sue agreed, so we played for about a year, 40 games in total, and there and then Sue's character, a young elven wizard, tried to communicate with Strahd to the point of using sending spells and lashed out at Irina a few times. That was weird. It was weird. So I tried to talk to Sue about it, and they just shrugged it off with joking, my elf has daddy issues, and he just finds Irina irritating. At one point, comments at Irina started being so harsh that the party had to humble him. So it all comes down to fighting Strahd. And the elf doesn't attack Strahd. Other players and I look at Sue like WTF, but continue. When Strahd is almost at 0 hit points, Sue tries to interfere with no, don't do it type of monologue. Of course, no one listens and the battle continues for a few minutes. Then Sue just crushes the battle map, breaking a few minis and shouts at all of us. We all look at them dumbfounded because they had their moment, but it all seemed like an inadequate person. Sue shouted at the party is ruining their elf's romantic moment with Strahd, and that he wanted to save him because somehow all Strahd's evilness came from Irina not loving him. This is wild. At the time, I reached my boiling point and asked Sue to leave my home. They left, but of course not without a fuss, starting to cry and said that we were all toxic. After that, they blacklisted all the players but me because obviously they needed to send me messages about being unfair and biased towards their elf. They even called me homophobic while knowing I am gay. I got around 30 messages like this during the night and the night of the game, and blacklisted them the next morning. As far as I know, Sue tries to play at another table, so I wish them good luck with their new master. I told you this was juicy. There's a lot to unpack here. First of all, I don't think that a lot of people understand what evil is, especially an evil alignment in D&D. If you've never built an evil character, if you've never built an evil bad guy or evil monsters, evil is not something that changes. It's so set in stone. And yes, I'm not saying that evil's not capable of love. It's not capable of doing good things, but it's not doing good things because it's good. It's not loving someone because, they're pure and wonderful, It's about, in case of love, about control and ownership. In case of doing good things, it's going to benefit them in some way. I don't think you quite understand the complexities of evil. I'm not going to dive too much more into that because I could talk about that forever. I love character building and I love world buildings, but moving past that, I think there's also an underlining issue with the mental health of this player. And I'm not going to make fun of this player, but I can definitely see that it's not wrong to try to romance somebody in a game, especially if your DM's comfortable doing that. But if a DM says no, like that's not going to happen in this campaign, don't try it, or no, that makes me uncomfortable, and you agree, that was a boundary that you both agreed upon. For this character to spend 40 weeks creating scenarios in their head and not being anything that's really happening in the campaign, I mean, there's definitely something mentally wrong with this person. And I mean, I get caught up in fantasy, I can imagine myself as characters of books that I'm reading, so I understand the deep love of fantasy and being immersed into it. There's nothing wrong with that. That's how we escape reality. That's why we play Dungeons and Dragons. But the fact that they spent 40 weeks kind of recreating the campaign in their mind and then trying to force that down everybody else's throat is not healthy. And then the fact that like this pursued to the point where it got violent, where they broke the board, where they, knocked the map into the floor and broke miniatures is wild. And there's nothing really, I think that the DM handled this in every right way. I mean, I don't think that there were initially a lot of red flags. I mean, the ones that they pointed out were definitely strange. Like, why is this person being rude to an NPC? And the thing is that, like, I mean, those are uncomfortable. We deal with uncomfortable situations all the time. We can't control everybody and how they view things, but I don't, but I do think that the DM handled the situation with just like letting them go. I just feel so bad that it got to this stage. Yeah, this one was wild. There's not much I can really say. I mean, all you can do is really let the player go and block them. So, I don't I don't know how you'd handle the situation. I'm laughing because I'm like uncomfortable, but it's uncomfortable. It's super uncomfortable because you don't want to like make it worse for anybody in this situation, but it's definitely incredibly inappropriate. So I just think that there's a lot going on with this one. Ooh. But yeah, it's the ever so I can fix some trope too to the absolute extreme. So I hope that this person gets to live out their fantasy in someone else's game. That's super into that. Our second story is a little long, but it's just as juicy as our first, so let's get into it. My first DM is a creeper. Yo, this is my first post on the sub and also storytelling, so I might not explain everything properly from the get-go, but I think the title says enough. To start off with, I, 19 female, was a new player to D&D and found a post on r/LFG looking for players that were new to D&D. I messaged the OP, the DM, and managed to join the campaign. I made a drow rogue assassin that was a bit very abrasive and a simp. Just think of a bard mixed with an assassin, and that's how she was. So at the beginning of the campaign, I never really noticed anything since as a new player, I wouldn't know if anything different from any other campaigns, which it definitely was, even unrelated to stuff in the post. One of the players was an experienced player that was allowed to play. He and I became friends, and this is how I realized that something was off, which he confirmed. The first thing I want to mention is that my DM, 32 male, had a way of, for lack of better phrasing, possessing the NPCs. He would essentially use the NPCs that my characters found attractive to flirt with me, the player. The best way that I could describe it is that he was a bit too intimate and it seemed geared much more towards me than the character. He would also often get too into it in terms of detail. One of his rules is that he does fade to black when it comes to not safe for work role-playing. That being said, I later learned that fade to black was just penetration. Yo. The first interaction that my character would have with her future husband involved excessive detail of bondage, kinks, in-character roleplay, and more. Oh my gosh. I didn't really feel comfortable with these things, but I figured that this was what a regular fade to black was. It didn't fade to black. Okay. My friend found out this was how his fade to black went when we were in a solo together. The short version is that his character was spending the night with my character's home with their SO, significant other. My player jokingly said that we should do a sex competition, which I obviously expected to get shot down. Nope, my DM was a-okay with that and continued to do about 10 minutes of in-detail roleplay, much more directed towards my character and her husband than my friends. We both kind of jokingly mentioned that it was a bit much, but he kept repeating things like, hey, this is what you wanted, or I'm just the DM, you chose this. Needless to say, my friend was appalled and brought it to my attention that this was not normal. Ooh. Another thing that my DM would like to do was add onto our characters that pretty much controlled them to what he wanted without taking over them. He would add descriptions and explain the characters' personalities to us, the players. He would either do a out of character or in character, but the one that I wanted to mention was one such comment he made in character as my character's husband. He liked to constantly mention that my character had this sexy sachet walk, and he absolutely loved. Mind you, I have never described her walk or ever implied anything sexual about my character. It was simply decided by him, which I guess one could argue that he was using it for building the setting and a relationship, but I don't think that was the case with him. Oh, and he also commissioned an artwork of my character being pinned up against the wall by her shirtless husband. Oh my God. The one and only artwork he ever commissioned as well. The next two things I'll put together since they were not as important as the others. The first is that he definitely showed favoritism towards me. Only I was ever I was given pertinent information to the campaign, both in character and out of character. I was also given double the amount of solos that anyone else without asking. He would constantly offer them to me and no one else unless he found it important to their character. The second thing is that I mistakenly told him that I wanted to play an MMO and I hadn't played in a while and barely played at all. After that, he offered to play with me so I would understand it better and have someone to play with. At the time, I thought that this was a fun idea and accepted. After playing one time with him, he would ask later that day if we could keep playing and then would ask me every day if I had time to play or if we could schedule a time. I'm a busy college student, so I didn't want to commit to anything. I had the time when I had the time, you know? After that, he would just randomly mention it and say, well, if you ever have the time to play, let me know. I wish I could say I recognized what was going on, but it didn't click for me until I started talking with the other player. I finally left the campaign. I just wish I could have had put the puzzle pieces together sooner. This one was particularly ewy. Very disgusting behavior. Let's begin with the predatory nature of a 32-year-old man setting it up so he is looking for brand new players to D&D, but I have a feeling it was brand new younger players to D&D that don't know better, that don't know what's a proper etiquette of gameplay, who doesn't know what's normal and what's not normal, and give them a significant other, because the feeling I get reading this is that this wasn't a normal interaction between a player's character and an NPC that have been adventuring for weeks together and have gone through things and have like naturally bonded, and it was completely the player's choice to pursue this character. This feels like this DM set this player up with an SO so that they could then play out these scenarios. Ugh, these icky scenarios. And now let's get to the second issue I have. Do we not know what fade to black means? Like, fade to black means we're not going to discuss the details. It's fading to black, and then the player gets to kind of decide what it is that happened, you know, what was appropriate for their characters and the response without being too intimate with it. You don't have these little sex parties where you describe bondage and all of these things and just fade to black right before, you know, the nitty gritty of it. You know, that's that is not what fade to black means. Am I wrong? Like, oh my God. But like, realistically, beyond all of that, yes, it does seem like the DM is using his position to neckbeard himself into a relationship with a much younger person and using his position of power to kind of feel her out, which is super, super icky. I mean, he's definitely feels like this is his cowardly way of like flirting with somebody. Inappropriate, but not to mention the commissioned artwork. That right there, that sealed the deal that this was so beyond inappropriate. Oh my gosh, like, I don't even know what I would have done as a player receiving artwork like that. Like, that would have been so wild. Like, oh, I feel like the only thing I would have done realistically would have been leaving the game and blocking everybody. I think the only good thing in the situation is that she met somebody that she became friends with that like let her know that this wasn't normal and was looking out for her. And I think that was an incredibly good thing because, you know, as she moves forward, she won't be as tainted in other D&D games. And I hope she does move forward. I hope she finds a wonderful game where she can like live out her little assassin bard dream. Like, this guy needs to go on a watch list. Like, I hope that the site that he finds players on has a review system where like players can talk about, you know, the types of DMs they are and stuff like that. That's just like, that really makes me feel uncomfortable that he's gonna be in a position where he can do this to other people. So be careful, guys, be careful. And if something feels off, it's probably off. That's all I have to say about that. Well, there you have it, friends and fiends, our two stories with lustful undertones and a lot of red flags. I'm curious of how you would have handled these situations if you were the DM or if you are a poor player. Please leave those comments below. And if you like this type of content, please be sure you subscribe so you don't miss out. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you next time.